That's on you.
All right, let's get started. Do we have prayer requests?
Get married this weekend. So this
I didn't even know you had a girlfriend. Congratulations.
Guys, this and this is out.
I'm joking. Did you have a fiance?
He
Congrats, man.
didn't want to wait until he had students.
What?
What?
No one else.
It was Jeff married.
Oh, she was never my student, clear, but whatever.
My dad's surgery went well. It was this morning, and he's in recovery now.
That was for the heart.
What was it again? His heart?
Yeah, he lost surgery. It was like a heart ablation or something. I don't really know what that means.
What's your dad's name again?
Mike.
Heavenly Father, we are thankful that Mike's surgery went well today. We do pray for his continued healing and his continued recovery. We do pray also for Alex as he gets married this weekend. Pray for a wonderful wedding that's honoring to you. Just pray that you would bless their marriage. You would let you be the center of their marriage, the center of their ministry. Let them enjoy being with family and friends this weekend. We ask that you be with us today as we study on how to do research. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. So today we're going to primarily cover how to do research. There we are.
Hey.
Oh,
New update.
there we go. And so I know for some of you, this is going to be quite boring, and I don't care. Okay, that's kind of how I view it. Heather, can you see that on the screen, or is it showing?
I'm not sure. I think you'll need to try it.
Let's be sharing. I don't have to bring it over to Canvas. Yeah, stop sharing. We multitask, get over into Canvas. So what we're going to go over is this PowerPoint. I'm going to upload it so you can see it. But at the same time, you need to understand this is like overkill. I know that you've had composition 1 and 2. Composition 1 and 2 are great. They teach it better than I do. That's their expertise. But there is something different when it comes to writing biblical studies research papers. There's something different about writing theology research papers. So that's going to be the objective with this. The first few slides, whenever this decides to pull up Canvas, when I pull it in there, it covers on how to select your topic. You already have 4 topics selected in the syllabus. Recall, you have Golden Calf narrative, Exodus 32. You have the Deuteronomy chapter 6, dealing with monotheism, Israelite religion, and whatever the 4th one was. I can't, polemical elements of any aspect of the Pentateuch that you want. The second part of today, we're going to go over how to do research with a paper and show you. I've spent a little time, I haven't spent a whole lot of time of putting together what that looks like on my end, like how I do something. So you'll see how I do that, so it hopefully will be beneficial to you, because you'll remember this paper is a minimum of 8 pages. If you recall the first day of class, I said you can pass this course with an 8-page paper. You just will not pass with a good paper with 8 pages. You'll make a B if it's well done, but you can write as much as you want. Okay, that is not, Logan, a challenge for you to write 40 pages. I need it to be within reason because I will read them. But I do think anywhere between 10 to 20 pages is a sufficient paper on this topic. It is not required. It is required 8. Now, I will tell you, if you just, to be very candid with you, if you don't get used to writing papers that are lengthy, then senior seminar is going to be very difficult. If you've only ever written 10-page papers, how are you going to learn how to write a 25-page paper for senior seminar? And so we need to start working towards writing better, longer research papers. So this is one of your opportunities for you to do that. All right, so with that being said, pulling it up, there we go, should be populated now. All right, so once it's there, you'll pull it out, I'll be able to pull it up so we can see it, and I can share the screen. Sorry, I expected it to work better than it did. All right. At any point, you can ask questions about this, and we will be done. I'll answer anything I can. One of the aspects that I provide you in this PowerPoint is for you to know what is a good source, because how do you know what a good source is? That's a valid question. All right, so there we go. That's way too long. I was hoping to use my computer so I could show you the other stuff as well. So how do you pick your own research topic outside this class? While it's just pulling up, it's filtering.
Typically, someone's mentioned in class, find it interesting, think about it some more,
Okay.
and more research on it.
All right. Anybody else?
It's been well studied before.
It's been well studied before. Okay. So most of the ones that you've done primarily focus on issues related to reporting back what you've read, right? So this paper is not just merely a report. It's also telling me what you believe. Okay, that's not typical with master's level stuff. So I want you to start getting to that process. So we're finally there. Okay, so a couple of things I want us to pay close attention to. When it comes to doing research, a method of study that, number one, identifies a problem. That's the chief among them. Okay, so with Exodus 32, if you choose verses 1 through 5, you're dealing with what exactly is the golden calf. That's the problem. No one can agree. If you choose chapter 32, 7 through 14, can God change his mind? That is a problem. Okay. Also, you should come to a solution. Sure, if you're going to text each other, put me in the text string so I understand. All right. That's what y'all are doing. All right. To do research, this is where most of you do not do this. You must collect data, organize the data, evaluate the data, and then present the data. Most of you treat your research topics like playing darts. You take a dart, throw it at the dartboard, whatever it hits, that's the topic you're going to do. You start doing it. Next thing you know, you start researching it, and you realize your paper is either way too broad or way too narrow, and you have now made a major mistake because you waited until 3 days before it was due to turn in your paper. Okay? For the record, Taylor and I both have probably waited 3 days before something was due to write a paper. I'm crushing you, but you're not at our level when we were doing this. I wrote an 8-page single-space book review in 3 hours before it was due because I misread the syllabus when I was a doctoral student. And that required me reading the 150 pages and then writing 9 pages single-spaced. But there's a system to that, and you learn how to read well, how to learn to write while you read, which is a skill that you need to learn to do moving forward. Maybe not in undergrad, but if you're going to progress, you need to learn to be able to research and write at the same time. All right, so a couple of things you also have to take into consideration is these two top portions, which are part of Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy has 6 levels. The last level you will never attain until you get to the doctoral level where you are creating information or creating your own arguments. And you must be able to analyze and synthesize. Analyze is you are able to read what they are saying and you can tell me what they're saying. And you are able to determine, is this a good argument or a poor argument? Now, synthesize is where I now take something that Taylor has written, I read what Taylor has written and I read what Lake has written, and I see that they're saying similar arguments. And I'm able to say points A and B of their arguments are the same, but arguments C and D are different. And that is called synthesis. I'm able to synthesize different arguments to see where they are similar and dissimilar. That is something that a 3,000 and 4,000 level college student must begin to do. All right. What does this entail? It entails, before you write the first thing on your paper, is you do systematic research. It means you go to the library. It is miserable. You go and you pull every Exodus commentary off the shelf. Logan, do not check them out. You pull them off the shelf. You go over to the photocopier, the book copier, and you take a photocopy of the book cover and the inside publication time. And then you go to Exodus 32 and you photocopy each page of that commentary. And then you stop, you email it to yourself, and you do that. You spend 2 hours one day. You go in there and you get every commentary on Deuteronomy or every commentary on Genesis, and you do that. It takes 2 hours and it stinks. But you now have every source you need on your computer. You can't write a paper if you've not researched it. You can't. You're throwing a dart at a dartboard, and wherever it lands, that's what we're doing. But you have an idea. I've given you the 4 ideas. Now go research, and then you start paring it down. So do you have adequate resources? I'm going to tell you right now, none of you ever have adequate resources. If it were up to me, where I could just get away with whatever I want to in this class and not have to answer to the rest of my colleagues, every one of your papers would require 20 sources or more, because that's real research. Some 8 to 12 pages, 8 to 12 sources is good. No, I want to see exhaustive research. I want to be able to know when you get to Taylor's level, the doctoral level, she better be using 60 to 80 sources per seminar paper. And really, research never ends. I know I'm coming off pretty aggressive because I'm pretty passionate about this. Research never ends. You just simply stop. There's always more out there, but you have to get in the weeds to know when to stop. Now, what do we do with that? So we have to figure out how to then weed through everything we're reading. So you have adequate information, objective knowledge, looking for facts, looking for conjecture. There's a lot of conjecture in biblical studies, lots of conjecture. One of the main arguments we're going to see in this a little bit is where God literally argues that Exodus 32 is not real. It's added to the text to verify and justify Exodus 12. That's trash. It's a trash argument. It's conjecture. But you have to be able to discern this. But
Can you define conjecture?
it's theoretical, hypothetical. They're suggesting something that doesn't literally follow logical deduction. Yeah. So they're conjecturing that information. And then I've taken care of this portion for you. So, but other classes, you can do that. All right. So what does adequate reading mean? All right. So an arbitrary picking of a topic is too broad. I'm going to go quickly through this because I've already picked your topics. For example, they can be too broad or they're pedantic, too tiny. The role of Moses in Exodus. That's super broad. But also Moses' use of snakes with Pharaoh is probably pretty narrow. Like, you gonna get 8 pages on Moses and snakes? Probably not. Inadequate research also leads to weak thesis statements. Thesis statement is directing you in your path of research. Inadequate research leads to weak argumentation. And then inadequate research leads to unorganized data. Now, one of the reasons about weak argumentation, inadequate research, also, let's just call this a different word, lazy research, reading only people you agree with. How are you ever going to grow academically if you only read voices you agree with? You can't. You have to read other voices to be able to respond to those voices. You have to be able to read widely. I do think at undergrad level, there is a real thing called liberal, moderate, and conservative scholarship. But in the real academic world, there are no distinguishing of those facts. It is either good scholarship or poor scholarship. Sometimes that is liberal. Sometimes it's moderate. And sometimes some of the conservative stuff is also poor scholarship. So as you move up and matriculate into the degree programs, because several you want to do PhD work, yes, there will always be liberal, moderate, conservative. But really at the doctoral and professional level, there's either good scholarship and not good scholarship, or lazy scholarship. And so you have to then determine which is good. And that's where undergrad is helpful, where you're learning those ropes.
What's the age limit you put on like the sources before? I know you said that.
I don't know. I mean, for me, it's never enough. You know, I mean, I will put it this way. You should have 4 footnotes per page, minimum. Yeah, 4 footnotes per page.
Like on the age of sources, like.
Pages, yeah, so there's a variety of, that's a great question, Alex. This is different on different professors. Like I know one colleague who says you should only use sources that are date from roughly 2000, 2005 to present. That's valid. I think that's actually quite helpful. But there's also, I'm not picking on him because I think that's a great idea because it's talking about what's currently being discussed. The issue is there's some really super famous stuff that was written 100 years ago. And the way you know this, so I will talk about sourcing in a minute. One of the ways you find a source is that you grab a textbook. First of all, this is the first thing you probably should do is no matter what paper you're doing, go select the newest commentary you can find, right? So Alexander's 2017 Exodus commentary. That's probably the place you start because that's the newest one. There's a couple of others, but that's like a robust one. Deuteronomy, you're probably going to want to go to Bill Arnold's Nikon. It's brand new. It's last year. So it's 2024. Why would I say that? Well, first of all, those are 2 world-class scholars with brand new commentaries, relatively speaking, and their sources are telling you where to go find other sources. So Bill Arnold is making an argument in Deuteronomy chapter 6, citing these people. That tells you those are the next sources you need to go look at. Because here's the leading evangelical voice in Deuteronomy, though that book not as evangelical as I would hope or wanted, but he's giving you sources. Particularly in his conversation on Deuteronomy 12, he makes a really astute observation about a really helpful book that you probably should all buy. Shameless plug. But that's where you do it. You go and you use those sources. But if you start seeing like super old books, 1950s, there's a Deuteronomy book from 1800s that gets cited every time because it's that famous. No one agrees that he's right, but he was so far ahead of the times that when he wrote that, you have to use it. That's what's called a seminal work. Nathan.
You said a minimum of 4 footnotes.
I think it's a good reference to have 3 to 5 footnotes per page.
Are those like new footnotes every time, or could it be like you're referencing someone already?
Yeah, just any footnote. So like if you've already cited Bill Arnold, reciting him again. Is that a fair, in your opinion? I think the 3 to 5 footnotes per page. Okay, on average, a page has 3 paragraphs of double space writing, ballpark. A paragraph is anywhere between minimum 3 sentences, by the way. That's Turabian, but it's really about 5 to 10 sentences. If each page physically has 3 paragraphs, there should be at least 1 footnote at the end of every paragraph if you're summarizing somebody. So if you have 3 paragraphs, you should at least have 3 footnotes. The introduction may be different because it's an introduction, but by and large, you should have that kind of working paradigm. It's not an ironclad policy, but it certainly says you've researched a lot if you do 3 to 5 footnotes per page. So then we go, so this is the beginning process. By the way, this comes from a textbook. We use this at a different school. The entire department has this PowerPoint. We lectured in every discipline. So, youth ministry, theology, because we wanted all of you to be on the same page. So you begin reading research. You then identify the problem or topic. So we're going to do this. God changed his mind. What is the golden calf? What are the polemical elements of Genesis 1 and 2? You then develop a thesis after you've read and identified the problem. That thesis is then going to drive your deeper research. So that's where you start weeding out. Stuff you're like, this is really cool, not really needed for my research. I'll make a note for this for later, but this is where I'm focusing only. I understand? And then you start collecting data and more data and more data and more argumentation. And then you evaluate that data. And then you present the data as a paper. And I'm going to show you these three processes at the halfway point. Okay, that's the objective. I've got to go quickly because this is a massive PowerPoint. Step one, this class doesn't use textbooks because I prefer to use specific readings. But any other class, you should start with your textbook. The professor gave you a textbook for a reason, and it should be at least used in your book, in your paper, like if it's relational to the topic. I've already told you, pay attention to footnotes and bibliographies. One of the things I do, I turn to the bibliography. Like, how do you think I built this syllabus? I haven't done a whole lot of extensive reading in Leviticus, but I know that Jay Schuyler and whatever his name, I can see him now, the other guys' arguments, I went and grabbed the books and I just flipped in their bibliography and just started reading their bibliography on things I think what I would find interesting to help me grow, to help teach you better in Leviticus, whether I require it or not. So I go grab those books. Always biblical studies use dictionaries and encyclopedias. Okay, so if you have the money, buy the Anchor Bible Dictionary set. Fair warning, they're used, $500. Okay, I'll sell you mine for $1,000. Okay, I'll sell mine for $1,000.
Will you sign it?
I will sign it. I even got my stamp in it. All of you should buy these, the IVP dictionaries on the individual. They're $70 a pop, or come see me one day and we'll have a conversation. I'm just saying, I can't say anything out loud. If they're in the cloud. Single volume dictionaries are not as valuable because it's like my work. I'm not an expert on everything. These have collections of essays and they're valuable. If I could tell all biblical studies majors, if you could buy one resource for the rest of your life for your ministry, I would buy every InterVarsity dictionary of the Old Testament, Pentateuch, historical books, poetry, and wisdom lit, and something whatever, and then all the New Testaments. Those would be, they're 8 volumes, $600. Ask for them for your birthday, for Christmas. They are the best information you'll have. Obviously, journal articles, monographs, and commentaries. Always use commentaries. Monographs are just books. That's what they are. And then journal articles. I'm assuming I don't have time to go over. Everyone knows how to access journal articles. Okay. Through EBSCOhost. Okay.
Interface.
What's that?
Said the journal articles are the most annoying interface.
Yeah, I may spend a few moments and show you how to do it. But this is also something that you don't know because you've not been used to use it. When you search EBSCOhost and it pulls up all these articles, if it says PDF available, obviously you download the PDF. But if it's not available, more than likely it's in our library. They're bound journals. Did y'all know that? So when you walk in, take a left, there's just row after row of bound journals. When I was a doctoral student, there was no such thing as downloading the PDF. You would write down where it was, walk over there, pull it off the shelf, photocopy it, and then take notes as you did it. EBSCOhost is very expensive. So to pay for a membership for Brill published journals is in the thousands upon thousands and thousands of dollars. And so we don't typically pay for that subscription, though we have most of them from print going all the way back. We probably stopped around 2015. So we have a lot of those there. If you're a distant student, that's more problematic. I encourage you to start now
emailing ill@nobts.edu. His name is Eric, and he is great at getting you resources. If you cannot access an article, if there's a chapter in a book that you think may be really helpful because it's not in, email Eric and he can actually get a PDF for you and deliver it to you within 24 hours. If there's a book you need and it's not in our library, you can access, and that's typically brought to us within 2 to 3 days. And you can keep it for 2 weeks and you return it. They'll either bring it from LSU, Tulane, Loyola here in the city, or in some cases Baylor. They'll send them from there. And so it's a book on loan. I think they charge you $2 to have that book shipped to you. And that's particularly when you're a doctoral student, there's no excuse. You have to do that. All right. So I already told you this. We do have other libraries. So sometimes you have to go to other local libraries. If you for you guys who are from Atlanta region, there were days I would take off the whole day and I would drive down to New York to Atlanta, and I'd go to Columbia Theological Seminary and spend a day in the library, or I'd go to Emory's library at Candler School or the main library to use those. I've already told you about interlibrary loans, things of that nature. All right, so I've already covered these things. So let's briefly talk about what is a thesis. It's the most important sentence in your paper. It is different from a purpose statement, and it includes the most important information the reader should know. Okay? Sometimes you can have a working thesis, and then at the end of your paper, when you're finally finished, you rewrite your thesis to be clear about where you're going in your paper. So everybody understand it's a roadmap. It gives all writing projects a central purpose, an organizing principle for all of its parts. Techniques for college writing. There's a book there. And so I want to encourage you to do that with your thesis statement. Question.
I got a question about the dictionaries. So would you to use the dictionary, how would you do that in a paper? Like if you're looking up like a specific word or having research over a specific word,
So
you take that, or like when I think like dictionary, you're like kind of plug it in.
no. It's a y'all didn't see this. So I will show you. Ted, are you seeing this? Is it not showing the PowerPoint? All right. So these are reference works that I've provided for another class, PhD course. All right. So the first one, this is the dictionary of the Pentateuch that I was referring to. And so it's going to take forever to pull up. It's 1,000 pages. But you'll notice that it has individual articles in the dictionary itself on every topic in the Pentateuch. There's one on every book, introduction to the biblical book. There's one on the background of every book. And there's one on every major person in the text of the book of there. So one of the things that you'll notice is, so let's scroll down to one, tries to pull it up. I do thank you for your technology, Pete. All right, so you can see this. This is the end of the D section. Starts with dreams, moves to E. So we have Garden of Eden. Okay, so everybody sees Garden of Eden. The way that works is this is an article title, and it would be the Garden of Eden in quotation marks. Does everybody understand? And I know it says Eden, Garden of, but it's Garden of Eden, comma, and then it reads like a dictionary. Okay, so when you did your introductions to a biblical book, you used one of these sources. This is the same book. So then you scroll all the way to the bottom of this source, and it tells you after the bibliography who wrote it. So this is J.H. Walton, that's John Walton. So you go back to it and you put John Walton, comma, Garden of Eden, comma, Dictionary of the Old Testament, colon, Pentateuch, that's in italics. Then you put parentheses, Downers Grove, Illinois, whatever date this is, 2009, and then the page numbers. So that's what we're looking at. So if you're doing polemical elements, you go to polemical elements in the Pentateuch section. There's an article in here on the golden calf. So you would use those as sources. And so when you're citing those in a book or in your paper, you just simply mention the author's name and then you describe whatever's in that section and put it in a footnote. Does that make sense? So where to begin? You can read that. We have things to cover. All right, so let's talk then about, you can go read all this. All right, so writing your paper. Your paper should include an introduction, a thesis or purpose, and or research question, or all three. It should identify a problem. At this point, you're not writing presuppositions and delimitations. Does anyone know what those are? We all know what presuppositions are. But what are a delimitation? So the source example we're giving today is Exodus 32. If I'm working on Exodus 32, I can't really chase 1 Kings 12, 25 to 32. I can't do Deuteronomy 9, and I can't do Nehemiah 8, which are those key texts. So I may put a footnote in my introduction and say, due to the scope of this paper, minimal attention will be given to the golden calf narratives in Deuteronomy 9, 1 Kings 12, 25 through 32, and Nehemiah 8. However, these texts are very important in how we understand Exodus 32, but for the current task, I'm not worried about those. Now, it gets you off the hook, but it doesn't mean the professor won't put you back on the hook. Does that make sense? Particularly at the upper level stuff.
And even with that delimitation where you're not focusing on those texts much at all, you're still probably going to use those texts to reference back to.
You'll reference them, but you're not going to unpack the historical context and the textual history of Exodus or of 1 Kings 12.
Yeah.
You just not. Presupposition for Exodus 32 may be, hey, we're addressing this from a canonical perspective. I'm not concerned about source division text, source divisions of Exodus 32 based by, like Dozman says, this is part P, non-P. Like you say, I'm presupposing Mosaic authorship. Footnote. Several scholars have noted that the Exodus 32 may have various sources, though we hold to a traditional Mosaic authorship perspective. Dozman argues versus such and such to such and such, or P, such and such to such and such, or E. However, this falls outside the confines of our confessional belief system. That's a footnote. Pretty simple. Question.
When writing our introductions, I guess this could vary by class. How much information should we assume the reader already knows regarding a particular topic?
I would tell you to write in such a way that they don't know any of it at the undergrad level. Yeah. All right. Obviously, then you have your paper, and you have to have sections. And this is just called an outline, right? You should write out your outline. After you've done enough reading, you realize I want to cover these topics in my paper. Go ahead and put them in your paper, right? And then a conclusion. So let me ask you this question. What's the last thing you write in your paper? Your introduction. Correct. Introduction and conclusion are the last things you write. Now, you can write an introduction to get you started, right? But really the last thing you do is go back to your introduction and rework it to make sure what you say you're doing, you did it. So you're technically redacting your introduction, and then your conclusion is also reiterating your introduction but do not copy and paste your thesis or your purpose statement or your research question. You need to rework those, but have them back into your conclusion. It is also a helpful tip, though not for undergrad per se. What would then be the next set steps of research beyond this assignment? Does that make sense? So you've done this paper, you've completed all this data. Now I say, this is my findings. Now what's next is how does this theologically fit into the larger golden calf narratives in the Old Testament? And that's just one sentence. It tells me now you're thinking beyond the topic at hand, moving forward. All right, so this is a really helpful thing you can look back to. So you can figure that out. So yada, yada, just repeating all that. All right, what research is not. This is me being cruel. A string of quotations. All that shows me is you read and found sources and strung the quotations together. You need to learn to paraphrase. Okay, so you need to learn to paraphrase unless it is so unique you can't restate it, or it's so erudite, important, you must use it. Is everybody track? If you paraphrase, you still footnote. You quote only when it can't be stated better or it's virtually important. You are restating people's words and ideas, a defense or an apology of one's own convictions. That is not research. This is not research. This is you rewording what people have said, but you're building an argument. Good research really isn't an argument against other positions except for the conclusion. Right? So in philosophy, we call that straw man arguments, where we attack. I love when people say, well, Calvinists believe this. Well, if you're not a Calvinist, unless you've read a bunch of Calvinists, you don't know really what they believe. Does everybody understand? And so if you're going to argue for someone's position over there, you probably should be really familiar with that person's argument. And you need to summarize it fairly. Taylor, have you ever come across when people say in a book, this person does not represent me properly?
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love when they do that. And then ultimately, research is not presenting your own opinions. It's not. Are your opinions important? Absolutely. But the paper is not to prove that you are right. Okay? So you can read presuppositions. We don't have to cover all those. They're pretty self-explanatory. So now let's talk real quickly about source identification. Okay? There's what's known as primary sources, secondary sources. You fail if you use tertiary sources. Primary sources, technically speaking, are ancient sources. Okay, your English Bible for this course is a primary source. In an upper level, graduate level course, PhD seminar, you're not going to use an English translation. You're going to have to put a footnote. The following translations are my own from the Greek Testament, New Testament, or the Hebrew Bible. Ancient Near Eastern text, what I put on Canvas, it's those. A seminal work like Julius Wellhausen's Documentary Hypothesis book, or Rudolf Bultmann's Demythalization Theory from his book. That's a primary source. Reading what other people say about Wellhausen or Bultmann is a secondary source. Does that make sense? Because they're not Bultmann or Wellhausen. So secondary sources explain primary sources. So these are examples of like English translations of the Greek, commentary on the Gilgamesh epic, Ernest Nicholson's The Pentateuch of the 20th Century, which is Wellhausen stuff, and then Carl Roy Harrisfield's Kerygma of History, where he's dealing with Rudolf Bultmann. Those are secondary sources. Basically, every source you're using is technically secondary sources because they're on the biblical text. Everybody understand? Tertiary, if it's even on here, is citing another person's work so you cannot access. You cannot find in the library. Okay, so you got a book and someone is quoting an author, but we don't have it in the library. You quoting that text by an author we don't have the textbook for from this textbook is lazy, sloppy, and don't do it. I've done it. Taylor's probably done it. But one of the things I have learned as I've matured is if this quote is something that's so important for me, the thing you best better find is spend hours finding the book itself to read the pages around it to make sure this person did not quote them out of context. Do not do this. Do not. Okay? Just don't. All right? So always try. Blogs are not scholarly unless they are specialized as scholarly. Question?
So like, if an author or writer uses as a paragraph, I like the paragraph, but they have like block quotes, or they don't have block quotes, sorry, they have citations within that paragraph.
That's fair. That's fine.
What do you think of?
And in your footnote, you probably put the footnote what you're pulling from the main our book.
Mhm.
In your footnote, you might want to put within this quote is whoever the author is, John Walton is citing from here. That makes sense. Okay, so just double layering yourself for coverage. All right. So I'm sorry we have to do this. Plagiarism, cloning, presenting one's argument or work as your own. Okay, that's just classic plagiarism. Partial cloning, sections of a paper are taken directly from a source with no reference. This is usually the most common. You forget to footnote something. Okay. Find and replace changing of words or phrases or content with no reference. Okay. So what is plagiarism? By changing a handful of words, that's still plagiarism. Even if you're paraphrasing it, it's their argument. Footnote it. Paraphrase or rewording an entire argument without any reference. Okay, so if you say John Walton argues and never gives a footnote, that's plagiarism. It's an accident. It's an actual accident. You know why I know it's an accident? If you said John Walton argues, you're telling me what that paragraph is from John Walton. You've just accidentally not put in a footnote, which we'll take care of in a minute. Recycling, source confusion, stuff like that. All right, evaluating a source. This is where none of you probably succeed at because it's hard. Who is the author? Where does that author teach? What's that author's expertise? Now, at the doctoral level, I expect all my students in my seminar to know exactly who that person is, where they teach, where they got their PhD from, and more than likely who was their doctoral supervisor, so that I know that they understand that the same way Nick Saban coached all these coaches, it goes back to a source. The same goes for the academy. Number two, who is the publisher? And so I give you academic / evangelical publishers. So academic, the list up here, these are the very best academic publishers there are. These are as well, because they're part of that, but I've separated them out. Brill. John's got the Brill book back there. John, how much did that book cost you? $250? More?
Probably.
Yeah. So Brill, they're premium, $250. Okay. They publish nothing but the best research on the planet Earth. Okay. Acid-free paper, smells awesome when you open it. I own a handful because they're expensive, right? World class. Zero theology. It is purely academic. De Gruyter, which is another very famous publisher. They run minimum 100 up to wherever they want to stop. More Civic, which is not on the list for whatever reason. I've left them off. They're the top 3 in the world. So Brill, which is Brussels, De Gruyter, more Civic, German, and then you can add TT and Clark, which many of you mentioned. That's a British publishing company, and those books also are $100. Erdemann's is American, Eisenbrauns is American, Forks is American, Hendrickson Press now owns Zondervan, but it's American. The Pontifical Biblical Institute is clearly the Pope. It's Rome. And then SBL is Society of Biblical Literature. Sheffield Academic has been purchased by TT and Clark, which has been purchased by Bloomsbury. So Bloomsbury owns TT and Clark and Sheffield. And then Westminster John Knox and Withenstock. Evangelical Abington is slowly moving their way away from evangelical. Baker Academic is academic and evangelical. So some of you read some Baker stuff, you're like, this stuff's liberal. I'm like, it's actually in Baker. Broadman Holman, everybody knows B&H, right? It's our Baptist publishing arm. Crossway, what do we know about Crossway's publications?
They're like standard version.
Okay. InterVarsity, it's interdenominational. Craigle is fairly evangelical, and then obviously Zondervan is very evangelical. Okay. Most of the time, this is not being cruel as one who would love to publish with these people. Most of these people, their textbooks, their books are being written for classrooms. Do you understand? Zondervan, most books are published for classrooms. I'm been in conversations with Baker Academic with a book that I'm trying to propose to them. Every conversation is, what class can this be used in? Can it be used in more than one class? Can it be used at undergrad, grad, and PhD level? That's smart. They want to sell books. The reason Brill is $250 is because they're not requiring it because only libraries buy it or John. And so there aren't that many of us that own these things. But this helps you understand if it's in that publisher, it's a probably good idea to use that as a source. And then peer reviewed, you can click all that. So there's the things. All right. So we've changed this. So this needs to be updated. I don't have a problem with using first person, second person. It sounds really weird to say the author argues, like you being the writer believes. But just say, I believe. Okay, it's okay. We're good. Do not use contractions. And say don't use contractions. I said do not use contractions. And use standard language. Standard is excellent and irritating, irrational. Colloquial are things that we would say to our friends that aren't really professional writing. Slang, avoid at all costs. Ideally, you would move from standard to formal. Like you need to be somewhere in here in your writing style. Yes.
So you said it's all right to use. Wait, do not use first person?
Dude, I said you can use first person, that I need to change that. Our policy at the school changed.
Yeah. Like research papers that I've written in the past, the absolutely right. Use first person, so it makes this right.
I've been here 9 years, and I remember when we voted as a faculty, you can use first person. Just means some of my colleagues may not be aware. But I'm sovereign over my classroom, and y'all get to choose first person.
We can choose first.
So
You don't have to do it. You
didn't choose it for us.
more so in the future, like if I ever were to write a paper on a higher level, like what is the standard to?
It should be first person, but you have to ask your professor. Because here's what's going to happen. Taylor's going to write her dissertation, and if she writes it in third person, the researcher will. And then she gets her dissertation published. She has to go then read her 300-page book and change the writer, the researcher to I. Because no one writes that way in academic publishing. Is that fair?
Also, every division is different. So Christian Ed does that, exposition does that. So just join the right field, like with studies, and you'll be like,
Roll Tide. All right. Let's then see if I can get this to work. All right, so let me go back out. Upload it via my computer because it won't share my screen. All right, so what we're going to do now is going to show you how I write papers. Again, I need you to hear me tell you, doesn't mean it's the right way. You do not have to do it this way, John.
And what you just had on the screen, can we look at it on? Will we be able to look at it?
I'll upload it. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's already in Canvas.
Yeah, the PowerPoint's right there. Hey, what, that would wake me up, John.
Hey, it won't wait long.
Isaiah and I spent a whole week in New York with him, and the whole city block was away. He would hit snooze and just keep going.
It wakes you up, but when my dog wakes up, she comes lick me.
He does like this joker up right there.
You ever heard like the sound of McDonald's? You ever heard the sound of McDonald's? It's like beeps that. It's a it's a 9:30.
I've been walking outside of books and inside.
I heard it inside my car.
All right, so this is what I put together last night, just throwing it together. No, I pulled from a book and then wrote a few things. Couple of things. One of the things that we don't require biblical studies wise majors, which we could and would, is that in biblical studies there is a style guide that every school uses, and then if you publish, you have to use that style guide. But what I would like for you to start doing is learning the appropriate ways to abbreviate biblical books. It's not required. But anytime you're referring to a biblical book by itself, you spell it out. Anytime there's a reference to a chapter or chapters, plural, you use the abbreviation. They're pretty easy. And anytime you do not use it, but you refer to the chapters, you abbreviate chapters here. And if you're talking about a verse, you do V period verse 4. Or if you do multiple verses, it's VV period. And it just helps streamline. Okay. So this is just generally an overview. It's the golden calf narrative in Exodus 32 represents the gravest violation of the covenant in the Pentateuch. Exodus 14, now I'm giving the context. Yahweh, in Exodus 14, Yahweh delivers the Israelites from the oppressive stronghold of the Egyptians. The Israelites cross the Red Sea while the pursuing Egyptians are killed by the returning waters. Once delivered from the Egyptians, Moses guides the Israelites into the wilderness of Sinai and to the mountain of God. So you always want to provide textual references. And in chapters 20 through 23, Moses provides, or God, Yahweh provides Moses with the Decalogue and the Book of the Covenant. While Moses is with Yahweh at the top of Mount Sinai, the Israelites command Aaron to make an image of the God who brought them out of the land of Egypt. Aaron comes to the people's request and fashions an image of a golden calf. Upon seeing the golden calf, the people declare the image is the God who brought them out of the land of Egypt. Following the declaration of the people, Aaron establishes a feast to Yahweh the next day. The opening verses, now we're moving into my paper. That's like the introduction. The opening verses of Exodus 32 are ambiguous in several ways. The first interpretive challenge is the word Elohim in verse 1. The Hebrew noun Elohim can simply mean God, as in Genesis 1, or gods. The second interpretive challenge is the golden calf that Aaron fashioned. Is the image a representation of Elohim / God or pagan gods? That's what we lectured on. Clearly, Aaron's establishing of a feast to Yahweh in verse 5 indicates that the image is somehow related to Yahweh / Elohim, at least by the person who made it. A third interpretive issue is the use of "these are your God / gods" in verses 1 and 4. The demonstrative "these" is plural, and yet Aaron fashions a singular image. The ambiguousness of Exodus 32, 1 through 5 has created a plethora of scholarly interpretations concerning the identity of the golden calf, and more importantly, what the great sin of the people actually was. The scholarly writ on the identity of the golden calf is vast, and no scholarly consensus has been reached. That said, several theories have garnered much discussion, and this is where I list out those theories. First, the golden calf breaches the commandment prohibiting graven images. Second, the calf is a fertility symbol that precipitated sexual deviance. Third, the calf represents a war emblem or celebration of divine victory. Fourth, Aaron attempts to create an idol that mimics Yahweh's fame and power. Fifth, the golden calf is a pedestal of the invisible Yahweh. Sixth, the golden calf is a replacement for Moses. Seventh, the Exodus 32 is later and used as a deterrent against the iconic veneration of Yahweh. And eighth, the text presupposes the idolatrous acts of Jeroboam at Bethel and Dan. I actually didn't put all of them in there. Like I deleted some. The next paragraph is then going to include my thesis. The diverse theories concerning the rationale for making the golden calf only cloud the overarching story of Exodus 32. The aforementioned theories of the golden calf have theological implications for Exodus 32 and on the meaning of idolatry in the Pentateuch and the Deuteromistic history. In this paper, attention will be given to the most prominent theories in an attempt to discern which theory best describes the golden calf and Israel's sin. That's my thesis statement. I'm going to assess all 8 and then make a conclusion based on textual data and scholarly data. You'll notice beneath that, I then have gone in and I've given myself headings. I've listed 5 of the 8 headings because I was lazy. I want to go to bed early, so I was lazy. So that's what I did. Okay, well, notice that this is titled sample paper. Now, if I were writing this paper for my own publication, I would have this saved as working document. What I would have. So if you're going to write your paper for this class, you're going to say 5 books working document. Okay. So the next one I've done is to help save us time, so I don't, fumble fingers because I can't type. This is then what I do. I need all of you to pay attention. You do not have to write this way. This will guarantee you will never plagiarize. It will guarantee it. Okay. The first thing you do, you take the first article that you have already read, Nathan McDonald's. First thing you're going to do is you're going to put in bold the bibliographical perfect entry. Right off the bat. Be super focused on this. Because if you do it right the first time, your bibliography is right when you're done. Okay? You do it. Even if you don't use anything in here, you still do it. You always bold it. You start reading the article. I scan through it. My highlights are already there. I simply write, because this is the only thing I thought fit to my context. Although McDonald does not provide a clear interpretation of the golden calf, he asserts that through the golden calf, and you have to capitalize it because he does, that people try to ensure the divine presence with them by an alternative means. Now, he doesn't tell us what this is, but that sounds like one of the 8 theories, does it not? It sounds like a replacement for Moses. He doesn't say that, but that's analyzing what he just said and synthesizing it to the broader themes or arguments. So you can put in the portion under that one. Though McDonald does not argue this, the following quote sure does seem to make the statement that the golden calf is Moses' replacement. Did y'all read Michael Huntley? Did y'all read this article? Super good. So Michael Huntley's article, you'll notice it's just all over the place. I went through it. In his article, what is the golden calf? Michael B. Huntley provides 3 helpful approaches to the religious context of Exodus 32, 1-5. He explains that the golden calf could, quote, serve as a representation of divine form, be a symbol or placeholder, and, or I should say, or be a pedestal or throne of the invisible God. Notice that I have added the footnote. So if I see the footnote, if I scroll down to the footnote, and the footnote for both of them is exactly the footnote as it should be. Every time. As I work through more of Nathan's works, I add, or Michael Huntley's, I add the same footnote every time. I do not put ibid. Because when I show you how to build your paper, if you copy third paragraph and move it over, you just transferred something that said ibid, and you don't know who wrote it. You always use the full entry And then at the end, when you're finally finished with your paper, then you can go in and clean up your footnotes. But there will always be where you will never plagiarize this way. Logan.
So when you're doing this research, you like already starting to paraphrase in your notes. I know, like,
This is what I do. I sit here. It worked better when I had a bigger computer, but if you have a dual monitor, I sit here with my source document at the bottom. That's my source document. And then I have my PDF pulled up. Does everybody understand? And these, you can do one of two ways. Okay, so this article is a PDF. I've gone through and I've highlighted the portions I think are important. I don't see any right here, but there was one up top. Where we go? There's, everybody see that? Okay, so one option is you sit there and you read all these and you highlight what you think is important. That's fine. Taylor, you can correct me if you do this differently, but what I do is I go and I find a spot that I can do research. It's not my house. It's got to be, I got to have a space. I got to have it's where I get away. I go. I've already done all my, like if I showed you my Exodus 32 folder, it's 30 sources. I go the first one that I know is good, click it, open it up. And what I do, first thing I do is I type out author, article, source, bold it, what's on the screen. I begin reading. And as I'm reading, if I see something that's good, I start typing as I read. You must learn to do that. If you want to be efficient with your research, you need to learn to be able to read and summarize as you go, because it's difficult to read and then come back and then go back through to see if that's what you need. Does that make sense? All right, so that's a skill. Taylor, is that fair?
Yes.
It's not easy. It takes time to learn, but once you do it, it's golden. Okay? You need to work towards getting past just quoting, but if it works for you to just quote it and then paraphrase it later, do that. Don't get bogged down. So I'll sit here and I'll just start reading, and then I'll stop and I'll start typing. I will then insert footnote every time so I know where it came from, every time. I finish this article, I close that article, I now open up my new article, which is Michael Heiser's article, and then I type out the heading of that on my working document, bold it, and then start reading Michael Heiser, taking notes. I can work through an article that's 20 pages and taking notes. I can probably do 2 in an hour. And I think that's fairly quick. But I also know that you need to learn, if my paper topic is this, and the paper in general is covering this, guess what you don't have to read? This section and that section. You can scan it, see it's not what I need. I'm only looking for this. So I understand. All right, so that's what I do. And I will do that for 5 days. So I'll do it. That's research. Like, you're building data. All right. So we go through this. Okay. So notice I get down here, the next point, the theory that the golden calf was possibly an image of Yahweh is supported by various pottery pieces discovered in Samaria. These pottery pieces have inscribed on them Yahweh calf or calf of Yahweh. I don't know if I'm going to use it in my paper, but that's a pretty good argument that this may be Yahweh. Everybody understand? Third, due to panic, the Israelites demand Aaron to make a golden calf, either to concretely manifest Yahweh's presence or to replace Yahweh as God, to replace Moses as guide or go-between, or simply render his role redundant. So I quote that because that seems to also echo what McDonald says, is that this represents a replacement for Moses. Okay? Moving on, I've got some more. Hundley goes on and he says that the use of Elohim is enigmatic, meaning the word could be used as a reference to Elohim, the God of Israel, or gods. Let me show you how I do this. Okay. So what I would do is I've already written that opening document, right? I would come over here and I would highlight this sentence. I understand what I just did. I would then copy that sentence and I would go back to my working document in my introduction where I say, the third interpretive issue is, how do you interpret Elohim? Is Elohim a name for God, or is it a name of God's plural? Do I track? I would put a footnote right there. And in that footnote, I would then copy and paste Michael B. Hunley argues, or notes, the use of Elohim. And now I'm saying, or you can put CF for confer, meaning Michael Hunley has come to the same conclusion I have, that this is interpretively difficult. And then you put the full footnote following that. Does everybody understand? You have a question?
Footnote after.
Yeah. Yeah, so then you would copy the footnote, you don't bring it with you, but if you're putting it in a footnote, you'd copy it and put it in there. Okay, notice then this last point of him, it says the great sin of the people may refer to a breach of contract, whether a marriage or exclusive relationship with Yahweh. So I'm reading along you first with McDonald, and McDonald makes a similar comment. But now all of a sudden, Hunley's made that comment, and now I'm realizing more scholars are arguing that this is an act of adultery, and now it means I have to add another component to my paper. Does everybody understand? So then I stopped. I actually put the footnote in from Hunley. I literally stopped, went to Nathan McDonald's article, pulled it back up, and put it in with Hunley's footnote, because now I have two sources that I have analyzed what they've said, and I have concluded they're saying the same thing. And now it's telling me I got to put this somewhere in my paper, and I'm only in two sources deep yet. So you see where I've added it here. McDonald comes to a similar conclusion. McDonald argued that idolatry could be viewed possibly as adultery. See, McDonald, abbreviated form, he actually makes it in 3 different places, that claim. I then worked my way through Thomas Dozeman's commentary. So I did this section in 5 minutes in the office. Don't take too long to know what you're looking for. I did T.D. Alexander's. I would probably go back in here. He prefers to translate Elohim as deity, so he doesn't want to use gods or Elohim. He's vague in that, so I could go back in there and add that. And so now I have all these sources. Does everybody track? All right, so what do I do at this point? It's impossible to show because it's hard to share this. But at this point, when I've got enough done, I open both documents side by side. Working document, all my reading and notes. Does everybody understand? I have my headings on the left. Start with the first one. We're going to go with Moses' replacement. I go to the McDonald section, drag and put those sentences in that subheading. Does everybody understand? And then I start fashioning that section by saying, another main theory is that the golden calf represents a replacement for Moses because he was up on the mountain and the people were worried that he would not come down, so therefore they want to replace him. Nathan McDonald argues, and I use that quote. Similarly, Michael B. Hunley argues this. And then as I build other people, if they start saying the same thing, you can just paraphrase one of them and create one giant content footnote. And you just slowly work through, copy, pasting it into the working document. Now, there's one concern here. This is where I get super technical on my own. I actually then create a second document with all those names, all that stuff on there. Does that make sense? Like all the sources I've read, I save it as the final one and then close it so that when I copy, I don't copy, I actually cut and paste. That way I'm not copying paragraphs and putting them multiple times on my paper. But then I still have the source one in case something goes wrong. I can go back and have everything I've researched. All right, so then once you've pushed them all in their location, Then you start curating each section the way you would curate a paragraph and an argument. And by the time you read enough, you start following a logical progression. Do I understand? Again, that's how I work, but I'm also dealing with around 50 to 60 sources at a time. So I've got 50 to 60 of those right there. I'm having to pull that over. The beauty is once you got a pretty good working structure and stuff there, then I can go to the library. Say you've done 15 sources. That's good. You've got all that done. You've got them massaged in there. But then you're like, you know what? I want to go deep, right? So Isaiah goes to the library. He goes and sits down next to the BS 2300, which is the X section. And he goes and pulls books off, and he has a stack of them. You saw me a couple weeks ago in there. I had a stack of them. I just start flipping through. Do I need this one? Nope. Do I need this one? Yes. Do I need this one? No. Do I need this one? Yes. And then I sit those books, open them, start reading the section I need, take notes, but start putting them in the real paper because I've already formulated all that. And if it's not needed, but it's adding additional voice to an argument that's already been made, now I've got 5 sources of 1 footnote that tells me that we have done a great deal of research. You've been able to say, these 5 people said the same thing. And that tells me you've not only done a lot of research, you analyzed it, you synthesized it, and you now understand it. Make sense? Questions? Only quickly. It's overwhelming. But I don't think anyone teaches you how to do this. And it's a lot. But this is what doing research is. I'm not trying to be mean, right? That really is what we're dealing with.
Would you ever utilize footnotes for anything, like in citations?
Yeah, let me give me a second. Actually, I'll pull up something real quick. You can use footnotes to say what English translation you're using, delimitations, just content, right? That's what I'm trying to pull up. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask myself here. You don't realize how many emails you send. I'll put them up. Question.
What is the standard of the foreign bib titles? Is like,
Yeah, so once you have a full entry, right? So once you've done a full entry, you are then able to do an abbreviated entry. Okay, so it's just last name, comma, typically 2 to 5 words of the abbreviated title.
book at the Bible.
Oh, I can give you those examples. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was not tracking. I can show you an example of an article that I'm working on where you can see those footnotes. Sometimes they're content footnotes, Isaiah. So for example, when you're dealing with Exodus 32, you may want to say, you may want to talk about 1 Kings 12, 25 through 32 and Deuteronomy 9 and what those texts say and how they're similar but different, but not use sources. That's the content footnote. In research papers, there's really 2 papers. There's the top paper, and then there's the bottom paper. That's really important stuff that doesn't deserve to be in the body of the paper, but it needs to be read at the bottom. And so then grading perspective. So this is how I grade. First thing I do is I look at your format. Is your title page correct? Believe it or not, the first thing I look at is you spell my name correctly. Ions. R-E-Y. It's alder, not ostrich. Okay. So you misspell my name, it's not going to go well, right? Your title page is formatted poorly. That's terrible. If you don't have 1-inch margins all the way around, not a good look. If you don't have headings or they're not centered, I have a graphic design degree. I know what centered is. And if you accidentally hit centered while you tabbed over once, it's off center by 0.5 inches. And so then you get counted off there. I then look at your footnotes. And if your footnotes look like you just threw them together, it tells me you're lazy. I also then look at who is in your footnotes to see if they're good sources. But if your footnotes are in proper order,
and your formatting is in proper order, and you have 3 to 5 footnotes per page, and you have nothing but really good sources, I know your paper will be a minimum B. You can be the worst writer to ever exist, but your content will be excellent based on your source material. You can learn how to write. You can. You can learn how to research. Give me someone who researches hard and can learn to write any day than someone who can write really well, but it's just super lazy at researching. Now, what I really want is someone who can really research really well and then super write well. And I got a couple of each of you in this classroom. And so I got some that are excellent writers. I got a couple of you that I'm like, you may be actually doing too much research. And if I get those perfect combinations together, we got something. And look, I think every one of you has a gift in biblical studies that you can really excel. You just need to have someone pour into you and tell you that. And so if I have this conversation with you, I talk to you about your abilities or things that you need to start thinking long-term, understand it's because I see something there that's very valuable. It can be really refined. And if you don't get that conversation, it's fine. Let's have a conversation on what can I do to improve. Why don't you turn to look at Isaiah?
He hadn't got that time.
Yeah, that's all. Well, he may now. He's got long britches on today. So he's growing up. He's growing up. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. Sit down with me, schedule times. If you want to come say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about structured paper. What do you think? And again, I'll be willing to help you with sources. And so I can meet you in the library one day and just bombard you with sources. All right. Word of the day, sources. No.
Yeah, well,